This is the Fatboy Show, hosted by none other than your friend, Fatboy. And here I am with the amazing Olive, who it would appear enjoyed her Women's Day a whole lot. How did you spend your Women's Day, Olive?
I spent it at work.
Were you you are not wined and dined and celebrated and praised for being an amazing woman?
No, not really. I was at work, and most of the conversation was about women and where we've come and where we are today. But of course, later I met with a few friends, so it was good.
All right. So when you look at the status of women today, do you still feel like there's a long way to go, or have you already attained everything that you've wanted? I mean, what more is there?
We haven't attained
you
everything.
You become vice president, you occupy so many seats in parliament.
You're speaking about just a few percentages. And if you're speaking about the context of Uganda, it is also not lost on many of us that sometimes the women appointed are not necessarily the best at the job.
Okay, there is that too, but I mean, you can't have it both ways.
You can't have it both ways.
Here's the issue, because whenever females demand more inclusion in these male-dominated spaces, there is seldom any conversation of the qualifications of the women.
No, we are having this conversation.
It just seems to be about the numbers of women.
No,
right?
Now we are having this conversation, and women like me are telling you that fine, hire the women, but hire them on merit, and two, hire the women that are suitable for the job.
I have always held that the women who have always been capable have always found the opportunities.
Not all the time.
I think, for example,
speaking about public officers.
When you're looking at, for example, the private sector, like I can't for the life of me imagine a business owner who would refuse to hire someone just because she's a woman, and yet that person can be wonderful in their various roles. So in the field, it could be in marketing, it could be administration, it could be in human resource. You would have to be a fool. You see, here's the interesting thing about bigotry. I feel like economics always solves all problems related to bigotry. So let's say someone is a racist. He hates black people. Okay, well, he wants to start a basketball franchise. He's going to have to hire a whole lot of black players.
Yes.
Or if it's a football team.
Yes.
Or it's if it's a European soccer team. You're going to go to Africa. And now you have like the French team, which is almost entirely African.
African, yes.
So, you can be as racist as you want, but that only means you're going to lose out on the pool of talent that is comprised of that group you may be discriminating against.
Yes, you need to secure the bag. And the corporate world is opening up a lot more for women, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing. The private sector has appetite for women. The public sector, it may have the appetite, but it has an appointing authority in some offices. And most times he may not give you the position because you're a woman and because you deserve it. He may give it to you because he can easily, play around with the strings of power and authority.
You see, and therefore I feel like it's a no-win situation, because Sarah echoes the same sentiment. When you point to, women making strides, even in the private sector, they will say, oh, well, they're hired just because they're easier to manipulate, or they're cheaper, or they can be easily bullied. It's like she's not willing to give credit to humanity for making any progress in that field.
I am willing to give credit, but let's, for instance, let's use the example of politics. Let's maybe mention people like the Prime Minister, and of course, no bad blood there. But when she was appointed as Prime Minister, there was talk that was she the best woman for the job? Because honestly speaking, I believe that there were many women that could have done that job. So if the point was to hire a woman, fine. Hire a woman that has the qualifications. Hire a woman that can actually do the job and do it well. We used to have, I think she now practices at the ICC, Julia Sebutinde, Justice Julia Sebutinde.
What happened to her, by the way?
She's at the ICC. She was so good, and no one said she was hired just because she's a woman. She was hired because she could do the job.
Yeah.
And that's what we want.
So,
hire people on merit. Don't promote your girlfriends like some guy did in NSSF.
Is that what he did?
There is a gentleman, I forget his name, who is accused of promoting his girlfriend and putting her on a certain board at the firm.
Well, it certainly can't be the managing director.
No, it's not the managing director.
We shall not speculate about at this juncture.
It isn't the managing director.
But I just feel like I'm glad that we are at the point where women are now more keen to look at the qualitative aspect of a person's talents rather than the genitalia they carry, because as a person that has advocated, free market policies, I've often balked at the idea that, affirmative steps need to be taken to redress these imbalances. I've always felt like the market will sort it out. And now that it seems like the market is balancing it out, where we're seeing more women in the public sphere and in the private sphere, I'm glad that we can now have a conversation about the quality of
The
talent
quality
we're
of
looking at.
talent,
And you
yes.
are right that the quality of talent being recruited by the government from the female side is very, very wanting.
Many times it is
When you look at
wanting.
the prime minister, you look at the speaker, you look at and a host of other people. We had a vice president before.
Oh, but wasn't she good? I was pretty young
Well,
when she was
had a
vice president.
number of
so,
wow. Are you too young to remember? Were you too young to remember the Valley
No,
Dam
because when
saga?
she was vice president in '93, I was under 10.
Well, there was the Valley Dam saga where, it was similar to this, where there was all kinds of misappropriation of funds and zero accountability. And, well,
I remember the Valley Dam
she's
saga.
not really left.
And then the Micro Support Center
There you
saga,
go.
where the farm lost 60 million shillings in a matter of 3 months.
There you go.
60 billion, sorry.
There you go. But anyway, so given that we are now ready to discuss the quality of people we work with, I'm glad. Let's move in that direction and discuss more how we can increase the number of qualified people, improve on our education system if that's the problem.
Because you see, if men don't want women to be in certain spaces, they will say, I have given you the job, the role of, let's say, a COO or an MD. But when deep down, he knows that you do not have the qualifications or you don't have the grit for that position, but he wants it to be filled so that on the outside, it looks like, I hired a woman, I am inclusive, but in the background, he's doing all the work, he's taking all the decisions, and the woman is just there as a face.
Although I would have to say, and this is where the patriarchal bone in me rears its head, I do feel nonetheless that essentially, as is the case with most civilizations, it is the men that create the institutions. So a woman can rise through the ranks to become top management, can become CEO, can become leader of a political party, can become a prime minister. But in essence, she would only have been following in the footsteps of the men that have created these systems. And this is something that I feel women are going to learn one day when the entire global order collapses.
So what's the point you're trying to make?
When we have to start from scratch, where we have no systems, no structures, no institutions, you will be shocked. You will, not me, to see that if women are left to themselves, you will never see the ascendance of a new civilization.
So you're picturing a time when the systems we have today will collapse because what? Women are rising? Is that what you're saying?
It's kind of like how, it's almost like marriage, where a woman wants a man that's has his stuff together already, has a good job, has a nice car, has a nice house. So she kind of just moves in and decorates the place, makes it look nice. And then she'll go around saying, hey, she built the home. You know how women talk sometimes. And then when it's time for divorce, she'll want to take half. It's funny. But why is it that in history you simply do not see civilizations that were started and built by women? There is not a surviving civilization.
I like the fact that when you are trying to start this diversion from what we're talking about, you said the patriarchal born in you, because you're answering the same question you're asking.
Born in me.
At the end of the day, you know history, you know very well that back in the day, many things were not started by women because the patriarchy of the time did not see women as fit to even be leaders.
We come
from a point where women would not even be allowed to speak because men thought, what would a woman say?
And then,
how would she change the world?
And then they became allowed to see. I'm following. Let's follow your argument. So before they were not allowed, so they could not and did not. But then later on, they were allowed, So they could and they did.
And my question is, are systems failing today because women are rising in the corporate
No,
world?
we need to uncover the very powerful premise that underpins your argument. That essentially, that in either case, it is the men that build and the men that permit and allow.
No, you were saying, point
That
me
is
to
your
his.
point.
You said, point me to a point in history where women started things. And
Yeah.
I was explaining why women didn't start things in the past, because the men of the day didn't see it fit for women to even have an opinion.
So why did
we
they
cannot
do it
really,
anyway?
We cannot really fault women for not speaking up at the time, because they didn't even have that right.
And this is the difference between men and women. You see, all civilizations and all institutions have been built by the force of will. It's not that a man woke up, said, hey, can I start a civilization? And everyone said, yeah, go ahead, we're with you. No, he had to fight and compete and risk his life and quite often lose his life. It's always been a tough competition for men to ascend to the top. Kingdoms and institutions and empires have been built over the corpses of men who have fought to dominate one another. It's very competitive. So to say we were not allowed to, therefore we didn't, what are you going to say about the men who similarly were not allowed to but did anyway? You know,
You see, Fatboy, you're trying to justify the unjustifiable. Obviously, men fought because they have the energy to fight. Are we supposed to do what you guys do?
In 1980, Museveni said the elections were rigged. I feel it's wrong, so therefore I should become the head of state. Well, they said no. What did he do? He took power by force. You get him? He was not allowed to take power, so he took it by force, and in so doing, risking his life and the life of his comrades. Now, on his part, he succeeded. There are many rebel leaders and revolutions that have failed, but he has succeeded. And so that is why I'm saying this is the difference generally between men and women, is that we are willing to take the risks and we are able to battle. It's never I don't know why women think that for men it's a smooth road.
No one said it is a smooth road.
We fight and we bleed.
And you are the same men that tell us that we cannot do things the way you do them. Case in point, we don't have the same energy levels as you guys. So if we cannot fight like you fight, we will speak. And speaking we have done since 1908 to this day, where I can even have this conversation with you.
And you speak and you speak and then they say, okay.
Somewhere. It has. It has.
But you see,
back
my
in
point is
1908, when the women in the United States started, the women in the working age of the United States at the time started speaking for themselves. No one even envisioned that the entire world today or yesterday would be actually having this conversation and gender inclusivity at all. So we've come a long way. We have come from somewhere to somewhere.
I know of cases in history where civilizations were established. There was economic prosperity, and it normally follows similar trends. You have empires built on the backs of men. It leads to economic prosperity and flourishing, which leads to the growth of the non-physical sector, the commercial sector, which now women can more easily participate in because it doesn't require the physical strength of a man. So if you want to run a school, want to run a restaurant, or want to run some sort of a service, a parlor, or anything like that, see, women can flourish in those environments where the economy supports those kinds of vocations. And there have been historically instances where that has happened. I think it happened in Sparta and probably ancient Rome also. And in both cases, what did it lead to?
No, okay, So did Rome
collapse?
Did Rome collapse because women were in charge?
Collapse.
Lie to us. Fatboy.
Partially.
No.
Partially.
Let's go back to history. I need you to cite that article and tell me that Rome collapsed because women were in charge.
It's a combination of factors. So, for example,
but
you will not disagree.
Pin it on women.
Just a minute. You will not disagree that the more women are educated and the more they are working, the birth rate plummets. This you don't disagree with.
No, I don't.
Okay. What does an empire need to thrive? A growing population. If you look at Japan, China, Korea, and most Western countries, their birth rates are below replacement. And it is because these are egalitarian societies that give women more rights, and women
No,
have flourished and gone into the workplace.
let's take it a notch behind. These same societies are the societies that had sky high birth rates that decided, like for the case of China, to have a one child policy, then two, now they are moving to three. And it's a little too late because after so long, after making people known to have children, now they want them to have children because most of their population is old and the people are not interested.
And they're still not having
And
the
who
children.
was making these decisions? Were they women saying that we can only have 2 children? Or it was the men in power that decided women should not have more than 2 children?
In a country like China, that was the case. But when you look at the other countries where there were no such laws, and yet we're still seeing constricting birth rates, essentially, the more women are economically emancipated and have all these options, many of them opt to either have their children late,
or not have
which
them.
means there will be fewer, and or not have them at all.
So is that a problem? Why is it a problem?
For you personally, it's no problem. Have your fun. But for the civilization, it's disaster waiting to happen. It's a ticking time bomb. Because what happens is once your population can't be replaced, you open yourself up to, first of all, if you have, for example, if you're a modern state that has social welfare systems, you do not have the population that can sustain any social security system, because you have to have, see, the pyramid, right now the pyramid is inverted. The elderly are more in number than the young.
Yes.
And yet it should be an actual pyramid
But
where you've got...
I hear all of that and I understand about the whole notion about civilization and the risk you run as a country if you don't have more young people in your system. But the difference is this. Compared to the woman of some centuries ago and the woman of today, she has options, and I don't mean options in men. She has options of saying, I will study, I can depend on myself, I can make money and fend for myself. Women back in the day used to have all these children, stay in marriages even when the marriages were no longer serving them because they depended on their husbands. They depended on the husband's family. Not being married was frowned upon back in the day. Not anymore. So yes, when you're talking about a society, maybe there is something there. But at the same time, who cares? Men had their cake and ate it for centuries. Right now, women are having their cakes and eating them too.
Fortunately for you, we are still a relatively backward society economically, meaning it'll be a while before we'll start to feel those effects. We still have a high birth rate, in Uganda at least, but we are still very poor. But you are going to see societies collapsing in the West, and I would say that the collapse has begun.
Society will collapse not because women have gone to school and they don't want to have children. Society will collapse the more you let vices like homosexuality come into your countries, because when you're a homosexual, you cannot bear children. A man cannot make a man pregnant, or a woman make a woman pregnant. And for me, I don't think that women going to school is the biggest threat.
I do think so.
To the survival of society. I think that the more we accept that other agenda, that is how much society is going to be affected.
Well, the way I like to look at it is descriptively, not prescriptive. So even as I explain this, I'm really not saying that we should do this or we should do that. I'm just looking at the historical trends that have happened in the past, and I'm looking at the common denominators, and those denominators are showing themselves today. And so I'm just saying that it is highly likely that we are going to follow in that same path. Now, for some people, it doesn't matter. They're happy to live in the moment, and for as long as they're enjoying whatever they feel they have today, that's all that matters, and good for them. I'm just saying that if you care at all for the future of the civilization and the society, there is some concern to be had about how we might want to structure our society. Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that the progressive society, and again, history repeats itself, the progressive societies are always going to be overrun by the more traditional societies, which is why in Europe...
So which society right now is overrunning the progressive society?
It would be Asia. you are
But it's still the society whose women are not giving birth,
I would say
whose birth rates are plummeting.
specifically Central Asia, Arabs, Muslims. If you look at the migration patterns in Europe, Western Europe at the moment, whereas the native population's birth rates has diminished to below replacement level, the Muslim immigrants who are coming from anywhere from Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Pakistan, and these places, for them, they're very traditional. So, and they'll have their own little communities where the women are living as though they were living back in their home countries.
But you see, the women they travel with to those other countries, let's say to Europe or the United States, will still be traditional until they have children, raise them in this new society, and they're exposed to new ideas. So you'll find that it will stop at a certain generation. It's not going to go on forever because they're exposed to something that their parents were not exposed to at a young age.
So now it's just going to be a matter of the race between how fast the winds of change are going to be able to blow to get to that point versus how fast they're going to be able to overrun Western society to the point where they can now change the laws.
Do you really think they're going to overrun just because Sunak is the prime minister?
To be able to impose, because in parts of UK, have you not heard that there is Sharia law, various forms of Sharia law, and there are concerns about there are concerns about the radicalization. There are concerns about the radicalization of Muslim communities in Western Europe, and you're going to see, and the more they grow in number, the more they're going to call for these laws. And when those laws are implemented, it could mitigate potentially the risk of future generations of Muslim children becoming more westernized.
But you see, you have so much faith. But let's look at the economics of the world as of today, because even if these women want to have many children, they still, yes, education could be free, but the other things, the cost of living remains high in the countries where they are, whereby even if they really want to have many children, at some point they will not be able to. And unlike countries like Uganda where you can have 10 children and they're all not going to school, in the West, it's incumbent upon you to actually take your children to school because the government is in your business, is in your family. You will have to explain why your children are not going to school. So I don't see a time when more Muslims are in those countries and they're outnumbering the natives. I don't see it happening. Not anytime soon, and maybe never.
Actually, in London, it has already happened. 70%.
That is one city.
70% of the residents of London are not white.
But they're not Muslims.
They're immigrants.
That's what I'm saying. They could be immigrants, but immigrants is a broad. It's a broad word.
But
my point is, I can't be in London and I am an immigrant. I can't be from Southeast Asia. I can't be from West Africa, South Africa, East Africa. So yes, they have many immigrants, but what percentage of those are from the Arab world?
I'll have to look it up. I don't know specifically, but to me, that's not so much of a concern because regardless, their birth rates are comparatively higher than of other immigrants. The traditional Muslim family in the UK, they're having 7 kids. Okay, 7 children. So you, the African Christian living in London with your 1 and 2.
What are the odds that those 7 children will also go ahead to have 7 children each? Because that's what I was saying. Their parents may be still traditional. Will the children also be traditional like the parents?
So that's why I said it's going to end up being a race between how quickly that change can happen versus how quickly they can grow enough in number and influence to where they can now influence laws that can ensure that doesn't happen.
No, that's why I said that chances are high that by the time the children are of age, they won't be interested in having as many kids as their parents. So it's going to be a slow pace. They're not going to outnumber anything or influence so much.
If you look at the ranks of the terrorist cells that are springing up all over Europe that are affiliated to the ISIS and like all these Muslim kids who travel from Germany and England and France to go and fight among the Taliban and in ISIS and Al-Qaeda. These are mostly second-generation Muslims.
Yeah, but then there will be a third, a fourth generation.
No, listen to me. So, but ironically, the second generation are in some cases turning out to be even more radical than their parents who migrated to these countries. So I know there's a big question mark here, and only time is going to tell how it's going to turn up. What I am appealing to inform my opinion is just a historical precedent, trends we've seen in the past, and how we are seeing some of those same signs bubbling up today. As to whether or not history shall again repeat itself,
It won't.
we will have to see. But in the meantime, to the women, I say, hey, do your thing, live, thrive, enjoy. I certainly wouldn't ever advocate that you're not allowed to do that. I just think it's interesting to acknowledge that there may be unforeseen consequences that we're not thinking about.
Oh, come on.
But consequences that might be felt in the longer run, especially here in Uganda. For now, we have nothing to worry about. So take all those jobs in the public and private sector and thrive. Not only was yesterday Women's Day, but the whole of March is the Women's Month.
Yes.
Did you know?
Yes.
So maybe this won't be the last time we'll have this conversation.
No, it won't.
Tell us what you think about this. Go to our Twitter or Facebook, or if you're watching this on YouTube later, just throw your comments just down there and let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Keep listening to The Fatboy Show on RX Radio.